On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was a victim of homicide by asphyxia from a police officer. The man's crime? Attempting to use a counterfeit $20 bill. That night, the city of Minneapolis was plunged into protest. Soon, protests, both peaceful and violent, circled the globe. I was angry at what had happened. Angry that I couldn't do anything. So I participated in one of those protests. In the comfort of a large crowd parading through the streets, we shouted at the top of our lungs. But without the comfort of the crowd, I was confused again, not knowing what I could do to try to make a difference. Yet I still felt compelled to do something. The world was falling apart, and I found myself wanting to understand how people felt and the different perspectives of those from my community. I decided to team up with one of my friends to make a video and have an honest conversation.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Ernest. I am a student at Denison University, and I'm here for an interview.
My name is Olive Woodward. Hi.
My name's Roland Garuder, and I live here in the neighborhood. My friends all call me Rudy.
Hi, my name is Karine Ernest, and I am a product manager in the telecom industry.
My name is Dariana Young. I'm 21 years old. I'm a senior psych major at the University of Massachusetts Amherst.
My name is Tanya Hungstermeyer, and I live in Dedham, Massachusetts, and I am a physician who works in healthcare information technology.
My name is Zeke Dexter Frankel. I am about to be a freshman in college.
My name is Alana Young. I'm 18 and I'm a freshman at Harvard College.
My name is David Leroy.
Hi, I'm Genevieve Lefebvre. And I'm excited for the interview.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
I think George Floyd's death was very similar to a lot of police brutality cases we've seen where the police are called in a situation that's like kind of unnecessary for their presence, and when they do arrive on the scene they escalate the situation until it results in someone's death. So I think it was handled very poorly.
Appalled. Obviously, they've got the wrong people doing that job.
As I viewed the recordings on TV, I had just a whole mix of emotions. It went first from just disbelief that this was occurring, and then as I heard George Floyd's cries of "I can't breathe," it went from disbelief to anger, and then from anger to just sadness.
It's a symptom of a broader horrible culture of unaccountability for police brutality. Unfortunately, it's been going on for years, and only because we have videos that people take that we're finally seeing enough of it for the public to finally be fed up.
It was frankly a modern day lynching.
It was a crime. There's no other way to say it. And the fact that people were watching, the other police were watching, and they didn't pull him off. It's their job to prevent crime.
He was just murdered. There's no excuse for what happened. There's no reason that Derek Chauvin needed to put his knee on his neck for over 8 minutes.
Over nothing. He lost his life.
What happened to Floyd was just another constant theme of police brutality, and I think it's complete injustice for black men and for George Floyd to die over $20.
No human being should be treated that way.
And so if it was a white person, not a person of color, I feel like the situation would have completely been different.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it!
I do think that they should have stricter parameters to work within. I think the police themselves are too spread out. I feel like we put a lot of responsibility on them, but in turn that gives them a lot of power. There are just certain situations where it's just not necessary for the police to come in, especially if it's like your life is not in immediate danger.
From what is happening now, I feel like police should be monitored more carefully.
There needs to be stricter guidelines as to when you can use lethal force on a civilian.
It just feels like everything that we do, and every time law enforcement says that they've tried to take concrete measures and steps to move forward and try to reduce police brutality, it doesn't seem to work.
I do think there should be stricter parameters, but do I think that the stricter parameters are necessarily going to stop this? No, I think it's going to take, more institutional change to actually stop it.
I think they need accountability, and they need training. There needs to be the ability to, from a culture perspective, for that to be considered unacceptable.
The police or law enforcement are not being held accountable for their behavior. Thus, if there's no accountability for killing a man in broad daylight, so what?
And the sad part is that the people who could have confronted Derek Chauvin probably didn't believe that if they had taken a stronger position and saved his life, that anyone would have thanked them for it. And that's the important thing that has to happen in an accountable culture, is safety, to call each other out and be thanked for pointing that out.
I think the entire police force is complicit in that behavior because there's like a secret code of don't tell.
They've got to choose the right people. You can't just have a license to kill and get off scot-free.
Black lives they matter. Black lives they matter.
I really feel like they don't care what's actually happening. They're just doing it. They're just looting stores, destroying stuff for their own selfish benefit. It doesn't help the protesters at all.
So I think there are people there who are not there to actually protest, but to cause more mayhem. I think there are people there to take advantage of the situation. I think you have a lot of people in those situations that are not there to truly protest. Mm-hmm. And I think violence just begets more violence. So my heart is with them, but I think it's not productive.
Protests, I think, are justified completely, but not riots and not looting.
Yes, I believe the protests are justified. They have every right to feel that way because of the injustice. And George Floyd is not the only one. George Floyd is one of the many. You have Trayvon Martin, you have Ahmaud Arbery, way more people who have also fallen victim to police brutality. So it's not like, the way the riots are reacting is because of one black person. It's because of constant police brutality.
They feel historically hurt, and you really can't blame them. I think there's a certain amount of scar tissue that people carry with them when they've been wronged over and over.
So yes, I agree, and I feel and I believe that they're justified for their feelings, but I also would not approve of looting and all that, because all that does is just cause chaos, and it doesn't really help the problem.
It's hard to equate someone looting and burning down a Walmart with the deaths of innocent people that have been going on for hundreds of years now.
If the government or policy-making people aren't going to listen to peaceful protests, then maybe they'll care about property damage and that kind of thing.
Better a store than a human life.
I'm not sure I agree with categorizing what occurred as riots, right? Because categorizing the actions of an oppressed group as riot, perhaps we should consider replacing that term riot with perhaps rebellion, which is an act of overthrowing an oppressor. Riots, looting, all those words tend to be used towards the black population or the black community. However, I seldom hear those words associated with large white groups that destroy property. I would prefer to use a rebellion because they were fighting for something and they stood for something.
The only protests in the long run that are going to build community support are the ones that protest with love. Martin Luther King said it over and over again, that you show support, you show presence, but you don't need to loot and riot and be violent.
Let me share with you a quote from MLK. A riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility, the status quo, than about justice, equality, and humanity. So as long as America postpones justice, we stand in a position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again.
This is the same shit that happened to George. It takes 2 of y'all to take one down, not 10, not 20, not 30.
I feel like you would know police brutality if you see it, and you would know police brutality if you experience it. Textbook definition would probably mean unlawful or extreme action by a police on a suspect.
Assault and battery, murder, torture, excessive use of force, harassment, psychological harassment, intimidation. All of those are aspects of police brutality.
A power monger of a person who works with the law. Just by saying this, I'm not going to say all cops are bad. There are definitely good cops, but we all know that there's a bad cop that does fit this trait.
I've been lucky all my life. All my encounters with the police, the few of them, have all been civil. But I can't imagine being a person of color and being grabbed away the police, being pulled over on the side of the road. You know, your heart must be pumping. You're scared. You don't know what's going to happen. You literally don't know what's going to happen because of your color.
There's fear of police, even though we're taught and we're raised that police are here to protect us. That's the white experience. It has not been, and continues not to be, the black experience.
Especially like as a black person, but I think it's more for black men who are seen as the ones who are aggressive. I think being a woman, that kind of like protects me sometimes from them reacting to me in a certain way because they don't see me as a threat, but I know that that's not true for everybody.
I have 3 boys. When they go out, I tell them, look, if you get pulled over by the police, now's not the time to fight for your rights, right? It's the time to get out of a very dangerous situation.
I haven't directly felt, I'm lucky, I'm blessed to not have directly felt any effects of police brutality personally. But you know, in a community scenario, yes, because you feel the pain for all the victims that have died, so you are affected.
Like, I've never personally been like accosted by the police. I hopefully will never have to have that happen to me. But I don't think any of us need to have that happen to us personally in order to feel angry and in order to be scared of the police and angry with like a society that like says that this type of behavior is okay and acceptable based on like the color of the person's skin that died.
Lose your head! We're not a threat to you guys! Y'all are the threats to us! You don't protect and serve! Y'all prosecute and slaughter!
I believe that African Americans are more likely to be victims of police brutality because of the perception of African Americans within this society. It goes back to the concept of implicit bias, where it's an unconscious assumption about those around you. And therefore, because it's unconscious, it's very dangerous. Because at times, you don't even know that you have such biases. And you may even say, no, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not racist. But you don't really know.
It's obviously all rooted in a deep-seated institutional problems that have been stretching back since the creation of the police. Since technically some of the first police to ever exist, really, or like police functioning people, were slave catchers.
So basically, when slaves ran away, people in town would kind of take turns going around and patrolling at night to see if they could catch runaway slaves. And sometimes they would bring them back to their plantations alive. Sometimes they wouldn't and would kill them to make an example of them for other slaves. Like, this is what happens when you run away.
Yeah.
And so that system of slave patrolling eventually morphed into our police system today.
The way that a lot of white slave masters like confronted owning black slaves was to make themselves believe that black people were dumb and they're less than human and they need a white person to, like, you know, control them because they don't have any other skills, that kind of thing. And then when slavery was ended, that kind of thinking was not addressed, and it just carried over from slavery into Jim Crow and segregation and into today. Like, I think that kind of thinking is just not addressed, and it presents itself like in the media, that kind of thing, where black people are portrayed as violent or ghetto, and like it leads to people having these internalized biases that they bring to work. And in that case, a police officer is probably more likely to think that a black person is violent and that they have no education and that kind of thing, and they think they need to shoot first.
Every police officer is coming in with their own implicit biases that they might not even be aware of. And so in the heat of a moment, guns work really quickly. You pull the trigger, someone's life is gone.
Seeing that over and over causes, when you think of, oh, like a gang member or someone of that category, you instantly think of somebody who's black.
I think it's just been ingrained in the police culture over the years. Not just the police culture, but the overall culture of the nation.
Silence is violence! Silence is violence! Silence is violence! Silence is violence!
Yes. I think it's analogous to having the coronavirus enter the country, and we were totally caught with our pants down because the pandemic task force had been disbanded. Imagine, if you have riots in the streets and the police have been disbanded.
As long as we have rapists, domestic violence, child abuse, murderers, we need law enforcement.
What we're asking for is just for the police and for law enforcement to do what they're supposed to do, to protect and serve, and nothing less or nothing more.
I think it's essential to have some model of law enforcement, but I don't think that model currently exists in our country. The model that exists in our country is successful. I really don't think so, or we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Legality does not equal morality, meaning that, like, just because it's the law does not necessarily make it right.
So I think the point of law enforcement is public safety and upholding rules of law, but not abusing a racial group and discriminating on how rules of law are policed. So yes, they're important. I think it's essential. However, I think the model that we have needs to change.
If involving the police means that someone else is going to die, then I would rather not call them.
And I know, like, defund the police is a really big movement right now. And one thing that I like that they focus on is moving the funding away from police and towards different things in our neighborhoods that will reduce crime.
A lot of the situations that we as a society respond to with punishment stem from being poor or in a situation where you don't have the means to provide for yourself. If we took the funds from that the police get and put them into the community to fix those situations or stop them from happening, then there wouldn't be a need for police to be called on a counterfeit $20 bill and result in someone's death.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down!
Policemen should be in and of their communities. They should know, they should be known and have ideally live in the communities they serve.
I think one who is engaged with his community, he's sympathetic to people that he lives around.
Yeah.
He's not just a stranger from the suburbs who comes into town to make a big paycheck and carries a gun and acts like he's the sheriff.
I think a model police officer is one that has had training and can empathize with the population that it serves and understands that de-escalation of situations are more important than trying to shoot somebody.
A model police officer would probably have to be someone that goes against the very system that he's or she's been assigned to protect, because the system itself is broken.
We live in a country where we can disagree with the government publicly and as loudly as possible without fear of being put in jail or dying, because that's the reality for a lot of people in the rest of the world. But for the police, they are put in a position where they cannot do that to other police officers because of fear of being benched and getting put on a desk. But I think a good police officer would risk that if it means standing up for what is right.
A model police officer doesn't exist. They all uphold a system that was designed to punish poor people, to punish people of color, to give them longer jail sentences, to give them bails that they can't afford, to create a rap sheet that follows them so they can't get a job, and that they're stuck poor, and that their family is stuck poor, and just continue the cycle of poor people and people of color to continue to be at the bottom so that rich people can continue to profit off of their labor and their suffering.
It can't just be one good police officer. It has to be everyone on board. And I think that a lot of people want to become police officers because they have good intentions.
Yeah.
And I think that the culture kind of makes it hard for them to stay a good police officer.
You can still hire great people, but if the culture of the department itself is corrupt, it will corrupt even your good hires.
Even if there is a model police officer, one good police officer, one good apple isn't going to make a big difference.
So ladies and gentlemen, we can't miss this time. We can't miss this opportunity. And we can't miss this chance to actually seize the day.
We have been trying to take practical steps. For example, people thought that body cams were going to solve everything. They were going to solve police brutality because no one would use excessive force or kill people on the job unnecessarily if they were being surveillanced.
It was obvious that someone was eventually going to just defeat the purpose of it.
But then people would turn their body cams off or forget to turn them on. And so I don't know.
Honestly, I don't think you can reform the bad apples. But I do think there are measures that can be put in place to systemically reform the entire department. I would work on, first, the education, the training, building up the trust within the community, and the accountability.
I think they should increase the requirements for becoming a police person. I think there should be 2 or 3 years of training. I think there should be intensive psychological evaluations done on all of the people entering those programs, and some of them should be counseled out.
Mainly make people accountable for their actions. Everybody should be accountable for what they do if it's wrong.
Police cultures that don't have accountability for not losing control are the ones where you have brutality. And you have to have the right culture that says, if I lose control, I will be embarrassed, I will be punished, I might lose my job. It's not acceptable, and I won't get another job. There has to be accountability.
Defunding the police and even this country's budget for the military, and putting it into education and healthcare in these communities that have never been adequately funded post-slavery.
We should not be giving away military-style weaponry and armor to the police against regular citizens, because that says that you view regular citizens as some sort of enemy that needs to be taken down with that sort of extreme force.
Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
It affects all of us. It affects our ability to interact with our neighbors. It affects us at work. I'm a teacher, it affects how we teach our kids.
I'm actually kind of ashamed that there are many people of my race, my skin tone, that tend to be evil, like Derek Chauvin, the person who killed George Floyd.
Yeah, it might not affect me personally, but that doesn't mean I can't get angry that it's affecting other people.
Everything's connected. We're all connected, whether we know it or like it or not.
It compromises our ability to be kind to each other. We're so divided.
Within the Black community, we need to address problems we have, things that came over from slavery, like colorism and homophobia, that kind of thing. We need to address it within our community.
You can't say like Black Lives Matter, but then pick and choose which Black lives you want to matter. And by that I mean like disrespecting trans women of color, because trans women of color are some of the most endangered people in this country. So when we say Black Lives Matter, we need to actually mean all Black lives matter, and it needs to mean they matter today, tomorrow, and every single day after that.
We need allies, people who can vote and can recognize kind of the situation that we've been trying to tell people about for centuries, and to use their voices as an ally to kind of have those uncomfortable conversations with their family, because it's not like us African Americans who can have these conversations and kind of bridge that gap. It's allies.
For the first time, really, it's not a Black problem anymore. It's a human problem. I see whites protesting Black Lives Matter. I see Hispanics. I see all sorts of people, all sorts of colors, unified, fighting for justice, fighting for equality.
I appreciate all the people that are, of different backgrounds coming to support the protest, because that's what I expect from different cultures and people with different backgrounds to help the Black community.
I've actually been pretty impressed with the recent amount of allyship and support that I've seen from like my non-Black peers. People are self-educating themselves more, which I think is the right move. And I think honestly everyone can stand to educate themselves more, no matter what your ethnicity is, like even myself, because I grew up in the same education system that doesn't teach us about Black history. Yeah. So I still have to take it upon myself to learn that stuff. And I think that people, more than just Black people, taking it upon themselves to learn the history and learn how deeply rooted this problem is helpful in the first step towards change.
Justice! Now! Justice! Now!
Being a white straight male in America allows me the ability to never think twice. I feel safe when many feel unsafe. Is this fair? Is this right? Yes and no. Everyone should feel safe. Not only me. Not only white people. White privilege is a real thing. And we have to start using that privilege in the right direction. We demand that there is justice found. People that are meant to protect us should protect us, not hurt us. People are dying to take us a step by step. This isn't fair. These atrocities must be stopped, and they must be stopped now. History can no longer repeat itself. We must change the narrative. Black Lives Matter.